Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. A couple of interesting things to talk through this week, so let's get into it. So the first thing to talk about is a blog post from the Microsoft 365 developer blog, and this is about Microsoft Graph. And specifically, this is about call records for Microsoft Teams. So that's been around for a really long time now. You could subscribe to call records. They happen on the wrap-up of calls and contain so much useful information about the call, and both in terms of diagnostic information, so the networks, the quality, things like latency and packet loss, but also a bunch of other information about the devices being used, the networks being used. You can really get a ton of value out of some of this data. Anyway, there was a change a really long time ago, and I had to look this up. It was March 2023. Around how much of this information would be shared in federated environments. So where you've got calls that span across different organizations, how much of that information would be available to organizations for the legs of those calls that were not from people from that organization. And there was a ratcheting down essentially to say that federated calls, the data around federated calls would not be made available outside of the organization. So essentially people and admins and people subscribing to this stuff in an organization will only see data for users within their org. Now, like I say, that change happened March 2023. It is just now happening for GCC High and DoD. So that's the blog post. And now if you're in GCC High and DoD, obviously you care about this because this is now happening to you. You've had all the way up until now where you've been able to get access to all of this data. That's going to start changing from early October this year. The only reason for putting this in, because obviously GCC High, DoD, if you're in those tenants, you care deeply about this information. If you're not, you probably don't care quite so much. I just wanted to highlight we beat Microsoft up sometimes, and sometimes justifiably, around the pace of change, and sometimes how that can be really slow for products that Microsoft don't really deeply care about, and how sometimes I hear comments are like, what are those teams of developers doing? Is there anyone working on this product and all that kind of stuff? Some changes have really long tails. Like these stuff takes a long time. There's people making changes in these other tenants that they have to look after and support that, are for changes that got made 2 years ago. So, that's a lot, right? So I'm just saying that to just sort of kind of broaden the knowledge, if you like, that you might not always see all of the changes that are happening, but just looking after a product as big as Microsoft Teams and as varied and across different geographical regions and segmented in also in this other way around, things like GCC High, DoD, it has a price to it. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. Speaking of making changes, I wanted to highlight a really good blog post by Andrew Connell, who excellent Microsoft Teams developer, does fantastic training as well. But he noticed this and raised it as a bug because that's what it was. Worked with Microsoft to fix it, and basically Microsoft to kind of change something. I think they probably didn't mean to, but they've ended up with kind of one of those unintended changes. This is all about Microsoft Teams tabs, and this you might be impacted by. So there's a fairly specific sort of use case here, but I can also see this being a thing lots of people will have. Really, like, you should go read this blog post if you are worried this might be you, or if you, after I finish talking, you'd be like, oh, this is definitely me. So the big problem here is where you've got a mixture of static tabs and configurable tabs. And especially if you use those things in conjunction with each other. So I'm going to go right down to this kind of real world. This is a useful one. So you've got a static tab with kind of a dashboard, no configuration, and then multiple configurable tabs. So for instance, you might click around in one of these, open new tabs. Things might happen and you want to open new tabs and users then kind of switch between them. There's going to be some problems if that's your model, because this change means that only the static tab is the one that gets opened, never the configurable ones, which feels wrong, but there's a workaround for now. There's a couple of different workarounds. They're not great, honestly, but they're better than nothing. I think it'd be good to get this thing fixed. I'm not sure. Again, see my previous comment about how things take a long time. I'm not sure how realistic that is, but just be aware if users start reporting stuff, this might be why. All right, but yeah, it's a really, really good blog post. You should go read the blog post. I'm not going to sort of go through it because you should just read it. It's well written. All right, and finally, let's talk a little bit about Copilot, because it wouldn't be a weekly update this year without talking a little bit about Copilot. And this is just kind of passing news, really. Microsoft is doing some renaming of some of their sub-Copilots, their smaller Copilots. We had a sort of fairly interesting time over the past 12 months where lots of things that used to be sort of features or sort of things by themselves became Copilots. So we had, Copilot for sales, Copilot for service, we had Copilot for finance. They were all separate Copilots and they had step-up charges to use them. Microsoft is simplifying a lot of this, and the big takeaway for you, I think for anyone really, is that they're getting rid of some of that step-up pricing. So if you're paying for Copilot or Microsoft 365 Copilot, you'll get those kind of extra things kind of rolled in, which honestly I think is how it should be. This is one of Microsoft's challenges with calling everything Copilot. Using one brand for a variety of AI-enabled features is a really good idea. I think it's a really good marketing strategy, and I think it helps them tell the story. The trouble with that is if you then it looks weird, if you then go against that and say, well, everything is Copilot, and yes, you have paid for Copilot, but you haven't paid for this Copilot, and that gets a little bit messy, I think. So I prefer the way they're doing this, where essentially they're saying, okay, yeah, if you've paid for Microsoft 365 Copilot, then, you get all of the Copilot variants that make that up inside inside Microsoft 365. You get all those included. There's no additional charges. So I think that's good. There's been some weird renaming as well about some of these things. They're quite confusing. I try to ignore them. For instance, this is so confusing. I think the Microsoft Viva Engage Copilot is no longer in active development, but instead, new features are being added to the Microsoft 365 Copilot in Viva Engage. Does that make sense? There's a Life of Brian quote that I'm not going to make that should be in there somewhere. All right, so just be aware that stuff's happening. It's kind of messy, but I think we'll get through it. Like I say, I think all in all, like it makes sense, and I think a lot of this stuff we allow to sort of you can let some of this stuff just float by without getting too worried and like there's a great American phrase like caught around the axle about it, or like spun around the axle, caught around the axle, fouled up in the axle. I don't know, you know what I mean. I think this is one of those things. It's like, okay, fine, it's changing a little bit. It'll be great news for people that are currently paying for it. It'll be even better news for people who felt like they couldn't afford it, because now they can. But for everyone else, fine, we'll just be aware of it and move on. All right, what's going on this week? Lots of things. So next week, I'm talking at Collab Days Europe. So that is, I say Collab Days Europe, it's in Bletchley Park in the UK. It's Collab Days. And that I'm going to be talking about building declarative agents for Copilot with a variety of different things. I've updated that talk because there have been some changes to the technology in how you can do some of that stuff. That was announced at Build. So that should be really good. Lots of other things going on as well. And it should all be good. All right, so I'm going to stop talking, let you get on with the rest of your day. I hope you have a great one, whatever it is you're doing, and I will speak to you again next time.